Hello, and welcome to the Specialty Matcha Podcast. My name is Ryan. This is my co-host Zongjun,
Hello, hello.
who also goes by Sam, and we're the co-founders of Sanko Matcha Products.
Yeah, we launched this podcast to discuss our learning journey in matcha, share startup stories, and interview experts. And today's episode, we are going to share a major milestone that we recently just hit, and we are super excited.
And it's sponsored by Sanko Matcha Products, so to speak. We try to keep this podcast as non-commercial as we can, but we also promise to tell startup stories. So sometimes the missions are a bit contradictory, but we will do our best to be as objective and clear as possible when these two things contradict each other.
We're hypocrites. We're hypocrites.
Indeed. So to zoom out and give everyone a little bit of context that might not already know, we don't just run a podcast, but we also have a matcha equipment company, matcha brand. So far, we have smashingly launched a single product so far that we ran a successful Kickstarter campaign.
The one-dimension matcha whisking bowl, which has been a giant success.
Obsidian.
Commercially and product quality-wise.
Yeah, we've been really happy with all the feedback that we've gotten from that product. And actually, in retrospect, it was really the perfect place to start the company for us, because really our original mission and vision was to make matcha milling and the ability to mill matcha fresh anywhere and everywhere. And that is a very, very tricky engineering problem. So we started simple and have gotten progressively more complicated.
Well, even the bowl was not that simple either.
That's true. Even the most simple products are quite sophisticated.
Yeah. But it really got us to end up talking to people in the industry with shared vision and standard, really, to help us understand what exactly do people like and do people want, or what exactly do people need.
Exactly. And to better understand, like, what are the industry problems and where and how can we add value as a company creating matcha tools? You see this rich ecosystem in coffee, and you see the success of third wave coffee and specialty coffee. They didn't have to invent the espresso machine. They didn't have to invent coffee grinders. They didn't have to invent pour overs or gooseneck kettles. All of this infrastructure already existed. But in the case of matcha, yes, it exists, but it really only exists within this very traditional sphere.
Yeah, it served a very different purpose.
Yes, for a very different audience, and that being tea ceremony, of course. So we wanted to start fresh as a company and act or think about, who are we stewards of? Who are we serving? Who do we want to serve? And our goal is to serve the idea of matcha as a specialty product, consumers themselves, and the businesses that service the consumers that are doing this matcha consumption on the global stage. The Japanese audience is pretty well taken care of, but we realized that there were some real problems to be solved for matcha within the craft of creating matcha in the rest of the world.
Yes, indeed. And one of the key challenge, or I would say missing components of matcha making, is matcha grinding. And that has been for hundreds of years being centralized and perfected in Japan. But now that matcha is serving a global audience, imagine like all of the coffee being centrally ground in Ethiopia.
Yeah.
It's just a very, strange kind of status quo that we are living today.
And then also imagine that all of the blends and all of the products and all of the flavor profile outcomes and quality is being defined by old Ethiopian men. When it's a product consumed by people of all ages, genders, cultures, races that might have very different preferences.
Yes, indeed. And in the case of matcha, it's Japan, and it has been historically serving a very, very narrowed and well-defined audience. But nowadays, we are seeing matcha being consumed globally, every corners of the world, in every kind of context. So that's a very interesting, I would say, dynamic between the market and the producers.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The Japanese have this concept of kaizen. A lot of people who read too many corporate books or something will come across the word kaizen, which means continuous improvement. And it's one of the reasons why Japanese manufacturing is so good. But the spirit of kaizen really lives in many of the different crafts and arts related to Japanese tea ceremony or Japanese culture in general.
But I mean, do see, the Japanese tea industry adapting to the current market, but it's at a very different pace, and the market is just evolving and expanding so fast that is probably unfathomable for the Japanese, all of these family-owned businesses that have existed for hundreds of years. They're not just quite used to dealing with this kind of change.
Yeah, but it's also like the means of Kaizen, right? Continuous improvement in service to what?
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
So, like, if there's Japanese tea competitions. If your goal is to become, quote unquote, the number one Japanese tea farmer because you won the competition, right? That's like, quote unquote, a fitness function. That's something that you're optimizing around. Or you're optimizing around the opinion of people who hold soft power, like the Iamoto. So, it's a very different type of innovation and feedback improvement cycle where perfection is headed in a very centralized and well-controlled direction.
Yeah, it's a bottom-up optimization.
No, it's a top-down optimization.
From bottom, well, depends on how do you define it, but the subject of what you are optimizing for is someone for the top, is someone from the top. Whereas a lot of these consumer markets that you see elsewhere, like coffee, like wine, you're optimizing for a more general audience that doesn't necessarily have a higher power than you or a higher social status than you, which is very much the case that is still very much alive in Japan nowadays.
So you have these like different spirits of innovation, right? You can have a continuous perfection of a craft through marginal improvement and in use of new technologies and getting very tight feedback loops with people who have a lot of authority, hard or soft power. Creating smaller incremental improvements is what you see in all sorts of things. Like we were just in Kyoto, and if you go to the Raku Museum, you can see each generation of Raku potter do their innovation, do their artistic style. And innovations can be aesthetic too, but it is very slow incremental change, and you don't really see failure being celebrated. So you have this highly insular, highly tight feedback loop, optimizing for these types of improvements, innovation cycles. Or you can let 1,000 flowers bloom. It's a lot more failure. There's a lot more public failure. But you can get, it's a very different type of optimization cycle that is kind of inherently not Japanese. Like the idea, think about all of like the amateur kintsugi people who got into it over COVID. Right? Like there's probably someone in Japan thinking, oh, these guys have no clue what they're doing. And like maybe that's true, but it's really kind of developing its own culture outside of that sphere.
Yeah, it's essentially new culture building.
Yeah, it's a subculture.
It's a subculture, or it's a new culture. Like, or matcha serve as one element in a culture, or in many cultures. Actually, it was born in China, and it served its cultural element in doucha, in tea competitions, or as tribute tea to the emperor for many hundred years. And then it brought to Japan and also served as one cultural element in tea ceremony, serving the feudal lords, the monarchs, offer as a excuse, so to speak, for the warlords to gather in peace and have discussions without drawing sword to each other. So it's of course culture related, and it should not be bound by one culture as it has. So like matcha really served multiple roles in different culture. It has never been really bounded by one culture or one ceremonial context. It's in nature a very freed item that's perfectly good for its own.
Free spirit.
It has a free spirit inside of it. And now we are seeing matcha being consumed and enjoyed and celebrated by a much larger audience globally. It has, transcend China, transcend Japan, transcend East Asia. It has entered into many corners in the world. I think there's no way to articulate the reason that matcha should be belong to a certain consumption scenario, or there's one certain or one correct quote unquote correct way of making matcha.
Yeah. And I mean, these industries go through adoption and innovation cycles. When mocha, matcha got first introduced to Japan by Eisai, I mean, I'm sure the Chinese were looking across thinking, wow, these guys have no idea what they're doing. This is not the proper way of doing it. right? And then there's like maturity cycles where these cultures develop and you have these innovation cycles. They can be aesthetic, they can be functional, they can be all sorts of different things. And there's some fitness function for that innovation cycle.
And honest to God, I bet Japanese matcha, just from a flavor point of view, tastes better than Chinese matcha back in Song Dynasty because you've shade cultivation and all of those optimization to make this product taste better and more nutritious. So although they probably don't know it was making it more nutritious, it certainly make it taste better.
There's
That's
some
for sure.
functional benefits, more L-theanine.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
it just made them feel great.
But like all of these innovations, all of these cultural or local adaptation are, at the time to them, and maybe also in the future, improvements. And they should all be celebrated because they are serving for it. They are made. They are being made and they are being innovated for the purpose, for the intention of creating a better product.
And within the context of Japanese culture and Japanese arts, that tight feedback loop, which is very top down and authoritative, where there's people with a lot of power, kind of like the patron system, patron of the arts, for like during the Renaissance or even before then, where like the Catholic Church was doing the sponsoring of the art and the art generation, very top down.
Yeah,
right?
well, meritocracy, there are a lot of merits about it, but at the same time, there are a lot of limitations too.
A lot of limitations. And what's interesting is matcha is growing and growing up to become a much more global product, global beverage, and turning into its own culture shared by many different nations and many different peoples. It's the ideas are opening up a little bit about how these innovation cycles, what form they should take place. Now that the matcha is living in spheres that are outside where it has been in its last cycle, being within a traditional Japanese society. And now we are definitely going to see, quote unquote, 1,000 flowers bloom.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a great sign. Like it's a sign of matcha being very much alive, not just being a cultural element enshrined in a gallery or a museum.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It needs to remain a living art and to change and breathe.
Yep.
And there is that change within Japanese tea ceremony, to be perfectly clear. There are some really staunch conservative people in Japanese tea ceremony that don't think much should be changed. But actually, a lot of the practitioners do see it as vitally important. But the fitness function for that change and who it is optimizing for is definitely not the matcha girly in California on TikTok or someone in Metro Bangkok or someone in the Middle East or in Latin America, right? Like it's, or in Europe. Like these are these places where we're seeing matcha boom and develop new cultures. Who's creating things for them?
Yeah.
Where are those innovation cycles?
That's a very interesting question. And that's honestly one of our driving impetus to create a infrastructure to enable people the capacity of making innovations.
Yes. So we've seen the craft of creating a matcha beverage spread all over the world, right? It's no longer on a tatami mat in seiza with a bamboo chasa and whisking a bowl in this very ceremonial ritual anymore, right? It's been adapted. It's been adapted into cafes in the form of matcha latte. You even see some cafes in New York and LA serving koicha or usacha, right? That's a little unthinkable when you think about this on larger timescale horizons. Not only are there people doing it crazy enough to have started that trend, but there are people who want that. Their preferences have literally changed. Move from awareness that matcha exists to koicha, that's a far consumer journey to go and to really develop a preference for that. And the fact that that exists now is just an insane thing to me.
Yep. Yep. And an insane thing to the Japanese people too. Koicha was a form of tea that back in the days were, only be able to be enjoyed by the very few in the society. Now it's so accessible by everybody.
So the craft of beverage preparation has really spread everywhere. But there's a lot more to what's driving these flavor profile outcomes, these products, than just taking matcha powder and preparing it into some final outcome that a consumer is going to enjoy. There's a lot more that's driving the flavor of these products further down the value chain or the value stream supply chain, so to speak. And one of them is just access to a fresh ground product. This boom of matcha is so new that these supply chains haven't had time to adapt yet to deliver people a fresh product. Freshness in matcha in Japan is not really a huge problem because it's all set up with hyper local supply chains. And like the availability of probably 2 to 3 month old matcha is pretty ubiquitous because people are also moving through it and consuming it as well. But that is just not the case for the rest of the world. And something that we realize the more that we learn, the more that we realize basically this might be a bit of a controversial statement, but the entire world is drinking stale matcha for the most part.
Yeah, that's very true. It's like the coffee example that we talked about previously. Like now the status quo is everything is getting centrally milled in Japan and gets centrally packed in Japan and gets shipped out into every corners of the world. And matcha as a powder is just not a form of product that's optimized for long shipping and long logistic abusement.
Or sitting in a warehouse, in an Amazon warehouse, waiting to be purchased.
There's no humidity control, no temperature control. It's literally getting second roasted.
And it's actually really unfortunate for small business owners because typically when you're buying matcha powder to repackage and sell, the MOQ, the minimum order quantities, are quite large. Even for us, like if we decided we wanted to sell matcha powder, we'd have to commit to buying like 20 kilos probably. Just a big commitment for someone who literally cannot forecast how quickly they're going to move through it. Unless you're a super influencer and you sell out in 3 days. This inventory problem is a very tricky one for a lot of people building small businesses all over the world on the frontiers of spreading matcha and the idea of drinking it and the idea of it as a specialty product, like a fine food. So something that all of this awareness has done, now that a lot of people know that matcha exists, people become inherently curious about like, is all matcha the same? Why is this one more expensive than this one? Why does it taste better?
Why is mine yellow and yours is green? But really, from even a taste point of view, a stale matcha just tastes infinitely worse. Worse at best than a fresh one. From a flavor point of view and also from a nutrition point of view.
Absolutely. And color as well. Freshness and product quality are heavily intertwined. So we set out to help solve this problem. And we first started with the observation that people already recognized the same problem. People were importing what are called ishiyusus, or these traditional stone mills, to mill matcha fresh all over the world. And we started talking with people that were owning and operating them. And we are very grateful to everyone that was willing to share knowledge with us and to really understand what is going on inside of these machines that make such a delicious product. And then to give us the fundamentals to think, okay, how can we engineer a solution that might be a little more scalable than sending around, 50 kilograms of granite all over the world that can only manufacture matcha at about 30 to 40 grams an hour, which is incredibly slow.
Yeah. Well, traditionally, all of the matcha are being milled by a machine or a device called ishiyusu, which is a stone mill. It's made out of soft granite in Japan. And these devices produce a very unique powder form that makes matcha just taste better and suspend better in liquid. Whereas nowadays, you see a lot of these more industrial production using ball mills or jet mills to also make matcha at a very fine particle size. They just do not necessarily have a very a very similar kind of particle structure than matcha coming out from ishiyusu. And what we want to do is trying to mimic the conditioned and the powder quality that a traditional ishiyusu can produce.
And very thankfully, in our last job, we were working at an AI company at the intersection of AI methods with human sensory perception, or the perception of taste, and consumer preference and product development. So we had a lot of friends who were food scientists in the food industry, and we had worked pretty heavily in product development at our last company. So our next phone call was to some friends in food science to say, okay, we need particles that are 5 to 15 microns. It can't heat up that much. Is it theoretically possible, you think, to mechanically create a device that can go faster, but just leveraging some different technologies, such as heat management, heat sinks, heat cooling systems, ceramic millstones, controlled compression? Like, is this possible? And they said yes enough times that we felt confident. Okay, this is worth prototyping.
Yeah, worth trying. And For I would say the first 6 months, we were really not sure that are we necessarily on the right path, or did our friend really cheer us up and over optimize us for a kind of an illusional goal. By 6 months we had something moving. And then after another year of development, we finally have something that actually tastes good.
Yeah. And I'll share a little story that might be a little embarrassing for us. But the very first time the machine turned on, we were waiting like, oh, like where's the tea? Where's the matcha? There's matcha in this hopper. We have a little feeding post. Maybe the feeding post isn't working. Maybe things are getting stuck. Where is this tea? Why is nothing coming out? Turns out it was wired the wrong way and it was spinning in the opposite direction. A real bozo explosion there.
Oh, we
We've come a long way.
we have come a long way, and all of the success were lessons learned from failures.
Oh, yes. We got so good at figuring out what didn't work that we were basically able to like get some attribution of like, if we tweak this, then this will happen, or if we tweak that, then this will happen.
Or if the machine is making some noises,
Maybe
probably
should
no.
stop.
Yeah, it should stop. Or we know probably something is wrong with the plate or the belt. Slowly getting into I would say, empirical expert matcha milling by just tweaking and playing with this machine so much.
So if we zoom out again one more time about like why matcha should be a fresh ground product, if we say that it goes through all the supply chain abuse and you have degradation of antioxidants, 40% of the EGCG, one of the primary antioxidants, will degrade over 2 months in ideal storage conditions, as well as you have chlorophyll degradation and oxidation, and of course, not to even mention the taste, will completely change. Why is that not the case if you're shipping around tencha or unground matcha?
The surface area of tencha is just so much smaller than matcha, that making it so much more resistant to oxidation when you're talking about shipping it in a sealed container. And not to mention about the customer clearance in import export difficulties between tencha and matcha.
Yeah, loose leaf tea versus powder.
Yeah, you will be going through a very different channel, shipping these two items.
I still remember back in our product development days, I guess it was about 7 or 8 years ago, we were working on a powdered beverage product, and it was it was getting imported, sent to us, but imported from another country. And it got so stuck in clearance. We had to drive like 1 hour to deep Jersey. We were living in New York at the time.
I remember
to
that
go
journey.
to some random warehouse. Like, hey, we're here to pick up this powder. Should be about 10 kgs.
Well, very gladly, those powders were not white color.
Actually, they were.
Oh, they were? Okay. That's why we had to go all the way there. When I was dealing with some of the sample shipping in China, like I remember our warehouse partner actually asked me specifically if the powders are white. If so, then you have to go through a very different, they call it the huagong, like the chemical engineering special channel for exportation.
Yeah. Well, good
Which
thing matcha
costs
is not
like 3
white.
times more than
Oh, wow.
the ordinary channel. So a good thing, matcha has a color.
But yeah, there's just a surface area explosion. I mean, if you look at a tencha leaf, which should be about 4 millimeters by 4 millimeters, so like pretty big, that is getting pulverized so many times it gets subdivided that each matcha particle should be about 5 to 15 microns in size. And to put that to perspective, it is 10 times smaller than a fine grind of espresso, an order of magnitude smaller than espresso grinds, and it is below the visual threshold. The naked, unaided eye cannot tell the difference between two 5 to 15 micron particles. The visual threshold is about 30 to 40 microns. So these particles are really small. And because of that, you have a surface area explosion. You have volatile loss. It's susceptible to oxidation. You have degradation of chlorophyll. When chlorophyll degrades, it goes from green into a yellow brownish substance, is one of its oxidative components, which also has the negative advantage of tasting bitter. Which is one reason why one of the flavor transformation that happens from a chemistry perspective as matcha degrades. So like it is actually arguable that fresh grinding matcha is more important in matcha than it is in the case of coffee, because there's just so much more surface area exposed. And like people spend a fortune on their coffee setups getting ever better coffee grounds, coffee sized particle sizes and distributions, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and like by the end of the day, after all those oxidation, after all those humidity infiltrations, you are going to have a inferior product. It's just not going to taste the same.
Now, having been in Japan, hand picking tea, watching tea processing, the
Oh,
amount of effort
it's painful.
that goes into creating matcha or tencha, even unground matcha, is unfathomable.
It hurts my soul just thinking about all of those efforts went into a can of matcha just to let it being sit under the tropical sun in a random warehouse, slowly getting expired. It's really bad.
Even when it follows the cold chain, like these chemical transformations still happen. And not to mention how environmentally unfriendly it would be to maintain product quality. Because even as the moment you mill matcha, it should really stay refrigerated as long as possible and treated like a fresh food. So, I mean, if you really care about the environment, this, in theory, should really help improve product quality because it really will lower the carbon footprint of the supply chain if you can move that last manufacturing step much closer to the consumer.
And just saving tons of nutritions.
I think about the number of metric tons of antioxidants that just wasted, vanished from the earth because it's going stale.
Yeah, it's criminal.
Well, it's excusable. There's no way to do it, right? You can import an Ishiyusu and it's going to cost $10,000, or you have to buy a really industrial piece of equipment to mill it fresh in your country. It's very understandable.
That's true. It's that there's a serious lack of infrastructure because of this global demand. Back in the days, they don't need this infrastructure to be available because most of matcha are consumed domestically in Japan
locally. Yeah.
And locally. So this is really a modern problem getting exploded or magnified upon a very legacy infrastructure.
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, that's a primary reason why we think this is an incredible, important problem to solve. And not to mention the fact that once you move that step much closer to the consumer, the craft of not only creating the beverage can become hyper localized, but the craft of creating the matcha powder can become more localized. Where a lot of cafes, coffee companies, new matcha companies, new specialty companies can exist buying tencha the same way that you would buy coffee beans from all over the world and creating local blends. And no one knows consumers like the people who are on the ground serving those people. And if we talk about like creating things in service to the customer, in service to the people who are actually doing the consumption of the thing, in this case matcha, we want a diverse group of people serving them. We want to see people who come from all walks of life to see themselves represented in these brands.
Yeah, matcha or tencha blending is a exceptionally tricky one because it has been historically controlled by this very mysterious group of people called chashi in Japan. It's so mysterious not only to the outsiders like you and I, but also even to the Japanese people domestically. Like when we ask questions to them about, what do you know about all these chashis?
The tea blenders.
They do not know very much about. They know their existence.
They know they're quote unquote very skilled.
Yeah, which they probably are, most likely are,
definitely are.
Yeah, like
but the craft of blending is largely unknown,
very being gated and obscured away from all of the consumers, which is a very interesting phenomenon. There are a lot of historical reasons and connotations went into that installation, to which that we're probably not going to talk about in this episode, but we very much want to see a world of that part of art being democratized to
and
people.
really available and accessible to anyone. Anyone should be able to acquire the skill. Doesn't mean everyone is going to be good at it, but anyone should be. And I'm going to critique Japanese society a little bit right now. But
whoa.
seriously, have a tattoo that you can visibly see. try becoming a chashi. You won't. There's just 0%
Well,
chance.
yeah, you can't even go to an onsen, a hot spring in
Or
Japan with a tattoo.
try being openly gay.
Uh.
Do you think you're ever going to like get an in on what's going on to develop the skill to become a chashi? How about a woman? Have we
Yeah,
ever heard of a woman ever being a part of the craft of tea blending? Right? Like the barriers to entry are highly discriminatory.
yeah, it's very historical, but also very true that there are a lot of, I would say, legacy obstacles that still very much exist in the world of matcha in Japan because Japan, the whole society of Japan, still live in that part of the legacy too. Still,
Yeah, and it really is a hamper on growth. You have to kind of be born into it and know the right people to even get into the right spheres to acquire the knowledge and the context to bring these products to life. And it is doing matcha a horrible disservice for the new generation of global matcha consumers.
this is very interesting because that part of the social role is so intertwined with the Japanese society that it's very difficult for them to be able to adapt into this new matcha drinking culture outside of Japan. It's essentially two cultures clashing into each other, so to speak. And the clash, I wouldn't necessarily think is a bad thing. I think that, this fusion and clash of different cultures and different ideas of trying to make a better product just because of different culture or different standards, so to speak, I think would generate something very interesting and beautiful in the future.
Yeah, I think so. And I really like the idea of kind of opening up this craft to a more diverse group.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Because like both culture do care about matcha and they do want to
yeah,
make a
yeah.
better product. It's just serving very different audiences or serving very different goals.
Yeah, historically. And it's just extremely gate kept. The
Yep.
motivations are a bit of a mystery. It is very opaque.
Yep.
How intentional it is, why it's that opaque. People will say a lot of it's like that blending and milling is proprietary, but
Yeah.
no one knows.
No,
No one
honestly,
knows.
honestly, we know so little about Chashi that we don't even know what to talk about.
And it's not even for a lack of trying. We've interviewed a lot of experts on this podcast. We've interviewed a lot of people in Japan working in the Japanese tea industry. It is very unclear of what's going on.
Yep, some are even Japanese too. It's really, really, really hard.
So hopefully we didn't make any enemies with that. But, Japan and Japanese society and these traditional crafts do not come without their negative benefits. And especially when you impose sort of modern morality and expectations and moral lens onto this very traditional culture that is historically very slow to change. So we do think this culture is important. It needs to be preserved. But I also think for specialty matcha to exist and to survive and to thrive in the rest of the world, where we're creating new optimization cycles and innovation cycles, creating better tasting products or brands that are reflective of new and different values, a new culture is going to have to be formed around create the idea of the craft of creating matcha powder. And that needs to live in a much more diverse set of hands. And that's actually where this podcast comes in. We are all about spreading the awareness of matcha as a specialty product and how it can be appreciated for the agricultural product that it is and for the flavors and expressions it can bring and for all the richness and all of the things that surround and touch matcha, culturally speaking. And but we're probably all going to have to help each other when we have these mills out into the world, in particular with these beta program. We cannot give you guidance on how to achieve a certain flavor profile outcome from certain tencha that you buy.
Yeah, we are as new as you do.
We cannot tell you exactly what speed you should run to get a certain level of bitterness. We cannot tell you what compression is going to yield the best matcha latte
Yeah.
when you're milling this cultivar or that cultivar.
But what we are able to do is provide you variable RPM or rotation and variable compression that you can tweak. We are giving you the opportunity, the freedom of tweaking all of these parameters, but not necessarily offering you a guidance on what is the best solution. for a certain goal. We are, as much of a newcomer as you are. And I think, we very much see you as our partner in this very interesting and adventurous journey.
So we are actively looking for beta testers, and we have a lot already as well. We want to get to a total of 15 people, and we're going to release the details of this beta testing program soon. But our goal with this beta testing community is to create partners, intellectual partners, maybe even sourcing partners. We can all help each other source tencha and discover how flavor transformations happen. What works best with this type of alternative milk? And what works best if you're doing an Americano versus a koicha for different milling parameters? And collectively learn together to create our own feedback loops to understand the mechanisms of these flavor transformations so that we can create things that consumers in every corner of the earth where people are doing this type of craft will have access to it. And this is not to hate on the craft of the highest end matcha that exists in Japan. We think it's additive. Even getting to the tencha phase of matcha production requires such insane and extreme craft. It's hard to wrap your mind around. So, we want to form this community where we can all learn from each other.
Yeah, absolutely. This mill is really the first component of a very large portfolio that we want to accomplish in the future. First footstep into this very complex world that we want to essentially build a new culture upon, a new culture that can be shared by each other globally, every corners of the world, that doesn't necessarily be defined by a certain small groups telling you what to do. We want to really create an infrastructure to offer the liberty for everyone to be able to explore this very verdant and fresh world themselves.
Yeah, and there's so many interesting stories and learnings even in our experiments in the past few days, we were doing different speeds with the mill, same compression, different speed. The rate of matcha being produced from the 15 RPM to 20 to 32 RPM was about double the efficiency. We got double the amount of powder in a given amount of time. The color, identical. The taste, very different.
Very different, yeah.
Color is actually a really horrible indicator sometime about what a product is going to taste like.
Well, if it's fresh enough, and also the texture too is pretty similar. But there's something happened along the way that we don't know for certain. But I think it probably will be related to the heat being generated,
the shearing force,
or the shearing force. Yeah. So
and the heat.
Yeah. So, but we don't know.
Well, weirdly enough, we open the mill every time we do it after each of these settings from 15 RPM to 32 RPM. We take a thermometer, we look at it, exactly the same.
Yeah, it's pretty similar. So it's very interesting.
Because if you imagine rubbing your hands together back and forth, imagine your hands are cold and you try to warm them up back and forth, your hands will get hot. But the moment that you stop rubbing your hands together, they kind of come back to that temperature again. Oh. So similar things going on where there is some immediate heat generation and then dissipation. Now, that being said, if your hands are already warm and you're rubbing them together way too fast, you're going to probably burn yourself. So we do have heat sinks that are actively pooling tons of heat that are controllable out of this machine. And it is able to stabilize, but we still cannot control the amount of shearing force because that's just a function of physics. You can't fight it. When you have that much compression and you're going that fast, that's just the shearing force and the amount of energy that's going to be created there. And the color's the same, the texture's the same, the efficiency is double, but it's a much more structured, bitter, and astringent matcha. It's much more intense. Actually, it's probably perfect for a latte. Yeah. And the ones that run really slow at 15 RPM, where we're milling, I'd say about 0.6 to 0.7 grams of matcha a minute. So about as fast as an Ishiyusu, a little faster in some cases. Super sweet.
Yeah, very little bitterness, super umami. And it was not even a very good tencha to begin with. It was some pretty mid tencha that we put in as a experiment. The amount of quality increased because we also tried the already milled matcha from the same tencha from the vendors that we end up procuring the samples from. like night and day difference. It's pretty interesting, and not to mention we end up putting some pretty high quality tencha into the machine, and it tastes phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, it was still very high quality tencha, but it definitely wasn't like Tazumi from a rare cultivar from a famous producer.
Yeah, of course. Like
But I'd say
especially nowadays, those kind of tencha are not purchasable.
hashtag matcha shortage.
Yeah. But well, good news to a lot of the tencha being more on the mass produced side of manufacture. We can really use this machine, or maybe not just this machine, but all of the machine that will be available in the future, but be able to achieve a very high quality fresh ground capacity. Good news. You can actually taste the difference.
Thank
God. Well, I mean, like we're by no means trying to be a replacement of Ishiyuzu, but we really want to bring the idea of fresh milling to life. And there are also obviously good fresh milling and bad fresh milling, and we have been really trying our best to try to hit the powder fineness and also the flavor at the best case results that we can get.
Yeah, but we by no means want to even define what is best. We can tell you what it tastes like, but it also depends on how you use the stuff. It's
Yeah.
almost like cooking. You can develop a tencha milling recipe.
Yeah, it's very contextual. Like one matcha is probably good for a usucha, but not necessarily good for a latte. Or one matcha can perfectly be very drinkable in a latte, but it doesn't necessarily be tasty in a usucha kind of scenario.
Or some cultivars might be better when you rest it a little bit after milling than not. Something that we've heard from people that operate Ishiyuzus is that some cultivars, when they put it through, it actually is very intense, very grassy when it first comes out. But you let it rest a day, 2, 3 days, then that's when everything kind of balances out and it peaks. Of course, you can't do that unless you have an Ishiyuzu, because these supply chains aren't that efficient that you can get something that quickly, typically.
Yeah, and there are probably like just so many other factors or problems that we haven't even encountered. But just having this machine, this device, or this capability of fresh milling be available to a lot of people, I think the whole discovery process or the result of this discovery journey is just going to be so much more diverse and so much more interesting.
And just to plant some seeds, there's no fundamental reason why you necessarily have to restrict this machine to tencha. These plates that we have designed and manufactured, these millstones, are very hard and they're very durable. We have really abused the current set that we have. I was touching them before we left yesterday. They're super sharp. It's like they look like the day that we had them made.
Yeah. There's a what they call self-polished characteristic of these ceramic plates, the material that we used end up choosing to make these ceramic plates. So it's very different from soft granite that what people used to make Ishiyuzu. It has in terms of durability, it's definitely much better.
Yeah, and it's also incredibly biologically inert. Like
Mm.
people have made artificial teeth out of this type of things and various forms of implants. It's a very similar material. It's the same material as the ceramic coffee burrs. So it's very food safe as well. We're very excited about possibilities and potential
Oh.
for people potentially milling some other things. And we actually think that we might have accidentally created the best machine for Turkish coffee that is also a suspension of coffee particles.
Yeah, or for buckwheat flour, Ryan. We can use it to make your favorite soba noodles.
But even within the tea universe, putting on some various white teas, it has to be something that's pretty soft and tender. If it's like super woody or lignous, it might do some damage or it might not mill very well. But certainly, there's some really cool experiments that people could start doing once these are in various people's hands. So the idea for other forms of powdered tea is well within the possibilities. It's not our particular focus, but could be pretty interesting for some people.
Yeah. Well, please don't put like super hard materials into it. It might be a little bit difficult for us to help you fix it. But like we obviously really want to welcome everybody to try to test the limit of the machine and also test the limit of your imagination and creativity.
So let's get down to business and be a little more real, Zongjun.
All right.
What's the timeline look like? When can we get our hands on these mills?
So far we have finally solidified the mechanical design of this machine.
Hey, there we go.
Major milestone.
I would like to take a small moment here to thank Sam for literally finding some of the best partners and manufacturing partners and design partners. It was very uncertain in the beginning, one, if this was mechanically possible, and two, if we could find anyone that was willing to go through this very uncertain roller coaster ride, if it's like physically possible to do this. And you set up, I don't want to be overly complimentary, but you really set up
Please try it.
the world's greatest process for finding the right partners. And we visited a lot of different people trying to find partners that were willing to kind of run with the punches with us. And we really found the right people. And this project scope has dragged on, I think, about 3 or 4 times longer than they originally agreed to in the contract, with only a minor change of cost scope increase.
But this is such an interesting and unique project that our partners end up, I think, really think or kind of transcend from their pure commercial interest that is willing to let us taking them for a ride. But yeah, it has really been a long but very interesting journey so far, Ryan.
Yeah, and we were really not 100% sure if this was even physically possible.
But finally, major milestone finally hit. But finally, we have solidified the mechanical design of this machine, and we have hit our major milestone. Honestly, an existential milestone.
Yeah,
this is really, if it will work or not.
There might be no Specialty Matcha Podcast if this hadn't worked, because we'd be out of commercial ideas and we can't run this forever.
Yeah, we being our own sponsor, no longer be able to sponsor this podcast anymore. But thankfully, it worked. And so right now we're looking at another 1 or 2 months of development time for the appearance design and the factory ready design, and then another few months of unknown time, hopefully within 2 to 3 months of filing all of the certificates and compliance for different markets that we want to launch.
For safety, for electronic certification, making sure everything's food safe, quality tested, and making sure that everything's up to spec with the quality assurance procedures for each one coming off the line. And our partners have guaranteed that they are going to personally inspect each one along with us. So these are really things that are touched and being very carefully born into the world.
So we are looking at our first commercial beta test probably by the end of the year. Honestly, at this point, after 2 years of development, I can never be so sure about a deadline. But this one, I can be a little bit more sure because, we actually have a working machine that can produce a product that lives up to our standard.
Yeah, and we're going to release all of the details about the beta program to our existing beta users. And if you are also interested in becoming a beta tester, please do reach out to us. Instagram, the form on the website, or just our email, Ryan.
Fax.
Fax. Please don't fax, or please don't call either. WhatsApp is okay. If you have my personal phone number, feel free to WhatsApp me anytime.
Yeah, we are looking for more partners. We are looking for a more lively and larger community that we can all grow together to make this a tastier future.
We're going to start with capping it at 15. If there's overwhelming demand, we might increase it slightly. We're not sure yet, but we're going to give out details around product specs, what we've learned so far, the cost, what you can expect from us, what you should not expect from us, and sort of what our expectations of being a beta tester are. Also, as well as laying out all of the risks at becoming a first user of a product that really has no equivalent in the world yet. There's a lot of unknowns and uncertainty, and we believe that we've structured the beta program in a fair way that adequately compensates everyone for the risk that they're taking in being an early adopter to what is an unproven technology. And it's unproven until we have a first set of users that can have their primary experience using it and to see the value it creates everyone else. So it's something that we're really looking forward to, but it's also something that we want to really find the right people to work with.
Yeah, really just want to say thank you to you all. Like it would have been a very difficult and lonely journey without all of you and without you, Ryan.
Thanks. You too. That's founding a company and doing things that are so uncertain, such a lonely path. And so many times, Zongjun and I left the prototype thinking, oh my, is this ever going to work? Like at one point, we were getting very good product, but it was being very slow. Like, how do we do, like at some points, like some changes really require large step size functions, not marginal improvements. And
Yeah,
we figured it out. So I think we just got lucky.
and you really develop a new level of appreciation for all of the matcha milling or matcha making equipment that was being created in Japan. At some point they were talking about Shizuoka being the tomb of
Kyoto Prefecture.
Kyoto Prefecture being the tomb of matcha mills, and we very much see our lab being the same way after all these development works.
And we are very grateful to everyone who's helped us on our journey in bringing this product to life.
Yep.
Time, money, wisdom, knowledge. Without that, we would be running clueless and contextless. But we also asked that all the beta testers kind of come in with a very open and kind personality. We would like to really, truly be your partners. Intellectually speaking, from a from a perspective, from an education perspective. We're all students of matcha, ultimately. And we're here to help and contribute freely and openly as much knowledge as you can. Something that's part of the beta program is like everyone will have basically unlimited access to us, which we obviously cannot promise everyone at the point where all these mills are being sold. But along with a pretty substantial cost reduction on the cost of this mill in the beta program. And then afterwards, we have come up with a really nice model for everyone else and their business to profit off of this as well, with a very competitive, well-compensated wholesale program where everyone that has had personal experience with the mill can then teach others how to use it and to spread the skill and the availability of fresh ground matcha to more and more and more people. And we would really like to see this be an organically led community movement where there is no right or wrong way to do anything, but we can all learn like what are the cause and effect relationships in milling matcha from each other. And then, everyone figures out, how does that work best for me and my business? Or how does this work best for me and my consumers? And that there should be no right or wrong way to do anything, and to have a very inclusive, open-minded community.
Exactly. We are here to help, and we are also here to learn.
Oh, yeah.
We're here to learn from you. We're here to, have you alongside with us learn from the consumers too. Like we really want to create a very positive feedback loop to keep optimizing and keep innovating. For this machine and also for all of the other products that we want to create to make matcha making a better future.
Yeah, no doubt. And even to learn from everyone too about what other products we can make as we can reinvest in new product development, because 2 years is a long time, Sam. Got to get that ball rolling.
Yeah. Well, hopefully the next product is less complicated than this one.
I hope so.
I hope probably not.
Matcha is
cry a little bit.
Big mess. A fair warning to all beta testers. Wow. You should look at our lab. The amount of green powder that is everywhere. Now, it's pretty well contained. The machine's airtight, but still, it's a messy enterprise. No matter how you're milling matcha, actually.
Well, flying matcha powder is messy, but also it's a good sign.
Yeah, if it's not flying out of the mill, you probably didn't mill it fine enough. It should be like snowing.
Yeah. So it's painful and happy at the same time. Wow.
Yeah.
Quite a feeling.
Wow. All good things take time, and all good things also require quite a bit of human hand skill and knowledge, and matcha is no exception. It's a future we can get very excited.
For sure.
And we can't wait to visit everyone. We will not travel to all 15 beta testers, but the way we are going to
we want to, trust me.
We would love to. But from a time, resources, and cash perspective, we are still a very small, under-resourced company at the moment. So please do be patient with us. But we don't know the exact number. It'll probably be around. We'll promise for the first 6 to 8-ish beta testers that give us a down payment. So basically, you will secure your spot in line by giving a down payment, or to prepay for the mills so that we can afford to to run this factory run for all of these mills. And for the first people who paid, either 6 or 8, we'll guarantee to come and do an in-person implementation. And if it's geographically convenient, like if you're in the same city as someone else, we will also, of course, come.
Yeah, can we do 9, right? Or 10?
It depends on airfare rates.
But yeah, we're coming along with the machine.
Yeah, and we're also here to help with tencha sourcing, as we are also looking to source tencha. We want to keep it, again, open ecosystem, so all the matcha businesses that are involved in the beta program can totally, not only can you sell on these machines in a wholesale capacity to your B2B accounts, but you can then get the reoccurring revenue of supplying your branded tencha to them. So we hope that the mill can create more economic value, significantly more economic value than it could ever deliver to us directly. We want to see the world of matcha milling accessible. And that means being able to mill any tencha from anyone, which is very important to us. So we really look forward. If you're interested in the beta program, please do reach out. We originally intended this podcast recording to be something closer to 10 minutes. We are now past 1 hour.
Wait, really?
We are. Time flies.
Okay.
But we really wanted to put what we were working on in context, and perhaps we indulged ourselves a little too much.
A little too much.
Thank you for listening if you made it this far. We really genuinely appreciate everyone that's helped us get this far, and our goal is to really work together to create a better future for matcha.
Yeah, thank you for your patience, for waiting so long for the machine, and also listening so long for this episode of the podcast, which originally intended to just be an announcement, but we end up talking something very interesting, Ryan.
Yeah, even after like 5 failed attempts at trying to do this, we were like, oh, I don't like that framing. Oh, we don't like the way this sounds.
Yeah.
And we thought it was 10 minutes, and you look at the clock, wow.
Well, we are excited. We are very excited and happy, and honestly very relieved at the moment.
Yeah, relief is a really wonderful way of putting it.
We please allow us to be a little bit indulged in this moment.
Details to come soon. If you're interested, please email us. I'd say in the next week or two, we'll have like physical documents with the details in, including the cost. Apologies, we're not going to put it in quite yet. There's still like 1 or 2 things that we need to double check before we can confirm it. But it will be more than $2,000, and it will be cheaper than a $10,000 ECU. And that is the range that we're willing to say, and it will probably be pretty close to the center of that. But we need to make sure that we're not making some serious mistakes by underpricing.
Yeah, otherwise we have to change the company into an NGO status.
We definitely need to be able to sort of repay our debts and also have enough capital to reinvest in new future product development. We see this as a gigantic snowball that we want to get rolling and really listen to everyone and what everyone's needs are.
Yeah, this mill and the bowl is a start, but there are many other matcha making tools yet to come.
Yeah, and it's a future we're super excited for. Again, thank you so much. We're actually grateful. We're grateful to our partners. We're grateful to everyone who's helped. We're grateful that this machine works.
Thank God, or whatever matcha God does. Thank you.
So we'll see you on the next one.
Yeah, see you in the future.